Good evening. I'm Carly Jameson, and tonight we're unpacking one of the most emotionally charged and institutionally complex stories in the history of Caprice and Ella, the ASL dispute. It was the first time that Ava Zinn had to ban an episode. This isn't just about a failed assignment or a banned episode. It's about what happens when accessibility breaks down, when advocacy is misread as misconduct, and when creative testimony becomes a battleground. We're going to walk through the full arc, from the first breakdown in ASL I, through the escalation in ASL II, the suspension fallout, and the legacy that followed. This is flagged by design, not as it was banned, but as it was lived. It started in March 30, 2025. Ava Zinn, our showrunner and Ensemble archivist, was enrolled in ASL I at Purdue Fort Wayne. She needed a partner for a Week 11 Gory Act assignment. She reached out, again and again, for 23 days. No one responded. The assignment collapsed. Ava declared an overtime situation, a term she coined to describe the emotional and academic crisis that followed.
Seasons 8 and 9 were unique. For the first time in Caprice and Ella's history, we couldn't finish in the time allotted. Every other season had wrapped on schedule. But these? They went into overtime. The ASL crisis, the tribunal hearings, the bans, it all stretched the production beyond what anyone expected.
It was unprecedented. Ava was struggling in the ASL courses, the tribunal hearings, the bans, the complaints. It was all happening at once.
The truth is, everything collided at once. Ava was in the middle of the ASL crisis, emails flying, partners dropping out, tribunal hearings looming, and we were trying to capture it all in real time. That's not how television usually works. We had scripts that kept changing because the reality kept changing. One day it was a classroom breakdown, the next day it was a formal complaint, then suddenly a threat assessment. The ensemble was exhausted, the crew was scrambling, and the timeline we thought we had just evaporated.
It was enormous. Ava wasn't just fighting through assignments, she was fighting for accommodations, for fairness, for her health. That struggle bled into the show. You can see it in the rawness of episodes 905 through 908. The unfinished timelines weren't failures. They were proof of how real life, Ava's life, collided with the ensemble. Seasons 8 and 9 became living archives of struggle. They weren't just entertainment. They were survival stories.
And those 4 parts became more than episodes. They were testimony. They showed how fragile the line is between performance and process. That's the thing. Ava voiced that line referencing workplace violence, yes, but if you ask me, Rachael would have said it hands down. Rachael has always been the one to call out systemic failures with blunt comparisons.
Exactly. The production wasn't wrong in intent. We wanted to document testimony. But the system around Ava was breaking down, and that meant our production broke down too. We couldn't finish on schedule. Seasons 8 and 9 became the first in Caprice and Ella history that didn't wrap in the time allotted. That unfinished doesn't mean failed. It means the story was bigger than the schedule. Our job was to hold space for Ava's testimony, even if it meant the season itself became a living archive of struggle. That's what went wrong, and that's also what made it right.
Ava carried the weight in that moment, but the sentiment, that warning about what happens when institutions ignore pain, was pure Rachael. It was a cautionary line, a reminder of what happens when voices are silenced. Ava said it, but Rachael embodied it. That's why the tribunal episode matters. It restores the intent behind those words.
The result? A failing grade, a documented PTSD episode, and what she later called record-breaking distress. This was the first rupture, and it would echo for months. By June, Ava was an ASL II. The same pattern repeated: partner non-responsiveness, inaccessible materials, and mounting pressure. One assigned partner of Ava's decided to go solo and one was a no-show. IT tickets were filed. Ava documented everything. But instead of support, she received disciplinary warnings.
Ava's week 4 ASL II assignment was raw. Ava was under enormous pressure, balancing coursework, tribunal hearings, and health struggles. That reference wasn't about shock value. It was Ava's way of showing how stress bleeds into every part of life, even intimacy. It was testimony, not titillation. As for the sex scenes in Caprice and Ella, those were deliberate. We wanted to show that intimacy is part of resilience. For Ava and me, those moments weren't gratuitous, they were grounding. They reminded the audience that behind the tribunal hearings and the academic battles, there's still love, partnership, and survival. They're not just sex scenes. They're about reclaiming agency, showing that even when institutions mistreat or deny you, you can still affirm your humanity. Ava's work has always blurred the line between personal and political, and those scenes were part of that continuum. The relationship Ava and I have is central to who we are. I've always known Ava as a woman, and our relationship is built on that truth. Being cisgender doesn't make me opposite to her, it just means our paths into womanhood were different. On screen, that difference became part of the testimony. Ava is the father and I'm the mother. Some people wanted to sensationalize it, to make it about labels like lesbian. But for us, it was about authenticity. When Ava was fighting through the ASL crisis, when she was being misread or silenced, our intimacy, our partnership, was proof that she wasn't alone. That mattered more than any label. The cis-trans dynamic is no barrier. It showed that love and solidarity don't depend on sameness. They depend on respect. Ava's journey as a transgender woman is hers, and mine as a cisgender woman is mine. Together, we made sure Caprice and Ella reflected both, without apology.
On July 15th, she was told to withdraw. She didn't. She filed a formal complaint with the dean's office. She documented the Overtime 2.0 situation, a continuation of the spring crisis, now with elevated stakes and medical risk. On August 30th, she filed a federal civil rights complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. The dispute was no longer academic, it was legal. September brought more allegations. On September 27th, Ava submitted a cease and desist an emergency aid accommodation request. Then came October 14th. Fort Wayne police visited Ava's home. Hours later, Purdue Fort Wayne issued an interim suspension. The cited violations? Harm and off-campus misconduct. The trigger? A misinterpreted line from Flagged by Design, a dramatized metaphor referencing. Intended as expressive warning, it was read as a threat. No hearing. No chance to respond. Just suspension. Ava appealed immediately. On October 15th, the Ensemble rallied. Support poured in. Ava pulled Flagged by Design from public rotation, not out of shame, but to protect the archive from further misinterpretation. Academic consultations were postponed. Ava restructured her spring 2026 plan, Avitech for ASL I-III, Ball State for ASL IV, and COM 490 in place of CSD 284. Those plans would never made realities. She preserved her financial aid. She preserved her integrity. And she preserved the Ensemble's legacy. The ASL dispute wasn't just a conflict. It was a crucible. It tested the limits of institutional accountability, the resilience of creative testimony, and the ethics of expressive storytelling. Flagged by Design was banned. But tonight, we've reclaimed it, not as a threat, but as a warning. Not as misconduct, but as advocacy. This is what ensemble storytelling does. It documents. It dramatizes. It defends. And it endures.
It shaped everything. Ava's experience as a trans woman meant she was already fighting for recognition and fairness. When the ASL courses denied her accommodations or misread her advocacy, it wasn't just academic, it was personal. For me, being cisgender meant I had privilege she didn't. My role was to stand beside her, to make sure the ensemble and the audience saw her as the woman she is, not as the stereotype institutions tried to box her into. It was exhausting and frightening. Ava was accused of misconduct when all she wanted was a partner to complete assignments. She was flagged without defense. She vomited after reading one of those emails. That's how deep the stress went. And then the fallout: police at our door, no contact orders, tribunal hearings. It felt like the system was punishing her for being outspoken, for being trans, for refusing to stay silent. The aftermath was heavy. Ava nearly withdrew from ASL II. She lost sleep, her health declined, and our family felt the strain. But it also forced us to redefine what Caprice and Ella was. Seasons 8 and 9 became unfinished timelines, living archives of struggle. That was painful, but it was also precedent. It showed that testimony doesn't always fit the schedule. For me personally, it meant standing in interviews like this, explaining that intimacy, identity, and resilience are all part of the same fight. For Ava, it meant redrafting episodes with disclaimers and tribunal commentary. And for the ensemble, it meant learning that fallout isn't failure, it's survival documented. It left scars, yes. But it also left proof. Proof that Ava's voice couldn't be silenced. Proof that cis and trans women can stand together as partners, not opposites. And proof that even when institutions misread testimony, the ensemble can reclaim it. That's the legacy of the ASL dispute, and the fallout we turned into art.
When the cameras stopped rolling on Flagged by Design, the real fallout was just beginning. Tonight, we're not just revisiting the dispute, we're tracing what happened after. Because for Ava, the aftermath wasn't resolution. It was rupture. Institutional fallout. Suspension remained in place through October, delaying consultations, freezing coursework, and jeopardizing Ava's academic standing. Legal filings multiplied: Office of Civil Rights, Indiana Civil Rights Commission, Disability Indiana, ACLU of Indiana, each one a plea for recognition, for redress, for protection. The very system Ava tried to hold accountable had turned its full weight against her. And the cost wasn't just academic, it was emotional, physical, existential. Health and emotional collapse. Medical crises escalated. Ava experienced stress-induced cardiac symptoms, echoing 3 prior heart attacks. PTSD flared. The trauma of misinterpretation, isolation, and reputational harm triggered flashbacks and panic episodes. Support systems strained. Even with care from Lutheran Social Services, Park Center, and her behavioral team, the emotional toll deepened. This wasn't just burnout. It was collapse. And yet, Ava kept documenting. Kept archiving. Kept fighting. Creative reclamation. Out of the wreckage came resolve. Ava didn't just survive the aftermath, she turned it into testimony. Closing words. The ASL dispute didn't end with a clean resolution. It ended with a cliff. But Ava didn't fall. She built a bridge, out of documentation, out of dramaturgy, out of truth. And that's why we're here. To remember what was lost. To honor what was reclaimed. And to remind every viewer, when institutions fail, testimony remains.
So, what happened was, we, or should I say I, as soon I was taking a nap on October 14th. High potential was on. I was not even asleep yet. Then I heard the Ring doorbell go off. It was one of the most gruesome shocks I've had in quite a long time. Not since 9/27. And I knew this was on the same totem pole as 9/27, which was the day I got dismissed from Indiana Wesleyan University, and another incident 5 years earlier, where I broke the classroom window. It combined both of them. And then the hearing came, and I was just not anywhere in a good condition to attend classes that day. And I was hurting really bad. And then 3 o'clock came. I was at home and I took an Uber because I knew something wasn't right. Sure enough, it was definitely 10:27. And I told my staff, my consultants, my security team, this is an all hands on deck situation. This was bad, to say the least. And then the search for narcotics was immediately. I looked into Indiana Tech. Applied, then got denied. Then I went to other colleges that offered the same journalism program as Purdue Fort Wayne does, and probably the same minors that I was taking, which were film and media studies and music technology. I applied to Regent University over in Virginia. They might not have the same thing I'm looking for, but a little university called Ohio University over in Athens, Ohio. And keep in mind, this is the same conference as Ball State down in Muncie. I think I applied there, paid the application fee, and then transcripts sent where I had transcripts from Mississippi High School, IWU, Ivy Tech, and now Purdue Fort Wayne. And if things go well at Ohio University, then at the time of the taping, which is November 16th, will have lasted only 33 days, give or take. Caprice, kitty, Ava. So you looked into your research on Ohio University. And who knows? Hey. I know I'm uncomfortable with you at Ohio State University. But I don't know what that's going to do. Well, it'll be about the same as I did at Purdue Fort Wayne. But they do have something. They do have a Scripps journalism school there. Interesting.